Ever feel like you just want to easy your software, not spend an hour downloading the latest update? We've all been there. But updates are just, I don't know, they're a fact of life in our digital world, right?
Yeah.
So let's deep dive into what they really mean for you, beyond like just the accept or postpone button.
Yeah. It's definitely more than just clicking a button. The history of software updates, as we found, it's actually kind of fascinating. It reflects how technology has evolved over time.
Yeah. One source took us way back. Remember when updating your computer actually meant like swapping out physical chips on the motherboard? Seems crazy now.
Yeah. Right. It does, but it was totally standard practice not that long ago. And the source walks us through that whole transition from, physically swapping out hardware to downloading patches, then to like online app stores and software as a service. Automatic updates. Each step changed how much control we have, how often updates happen, even what updating really means.
Seriously, we've gone from like a time when you consciously chose when and how to update your software to this like constant stream of background updates. Speaking of updates, this source breaks down the main reasons we even have them. Bug fixes, extended functionality, and of course those shiny new features.
Right.
And let's be honest, sometimes those new features, they're like the main course, even if they're not always what we actually need.
It's true. And each of those reasons, they come with their own considerations, right? Like, let's start with bug fixes. On the surface, seem great. Who doesn't love a good bug squash?
Absolutely. It's so satisfying when an update finally addresses that like annoying glitch that's been slowing you down. You know what I mean?
Exactly. But fixing software, it isn't always as simple as it seems, right? Sometimes, like, you fix one bug, you accidentally introduce a new one.
Oh, yeah.
Or even worse, you resurrect an old bug that you thought was gone for good.
It's like whack-a-mole with those glitches,
Yeah.
You fix one and then another one pops up. It makes you wonder if those bug fixes are always worth it, with the headaches and all.
Yeah, I hear you. And this source digs into why these issues even come up in the first place. One thing is just how complex software is these days. Millions of lines of code. Even a tiny change can snowball. It's like, tweaking a recipe just a little. Sometimes it's great. Sometimes you've got a totally different dish on your hands.
And then there's the pressure on developers to release updates quickly.
Right.
Everything's so fast-paced these days. Everyone expects constant improvements, new features, the whole 9 yards. Sometimes, I'm sure that leads to shortcuts in testing, which is probably how those new bugs pop up.
Exactly. Delicate balance. You know what I mean?
Mm.
But moving on from bug fixes for a sec, what about those extended features we see? Those often sound cool. Who doesn't want more from their software?
Right.
But this source, they make a good point. They say extended functionality, it only really adds value if it actually works with how you use the software.
So true. Easy to get caught up in new tools, new features, new everything. But then, if they just clutter up your workflow, make things more complex, not so beneficial anymore, less is more, or whatever they say.
For sure. And this leads right into our next point about software completeness. Right?
Okay, yeah.
So this source is arguing that even software, which, always evolving, should have a point where it's like finished.
Okay.
Where its core purpose is fulfilled. And then like any more additions, they might actually make it worse, make it less elegant, harder to use.
That's interesting, especially these days, right? Constant pressure to innovate, iterate, all that.
Yeah.
But what are the criteria for complete then?
Yeah.
How do you know when software's reached that point?
That is the question, isn't it? It's not always obvious. But this source, they say one key indicator is when the software consistently does what it should for its users without being overly complex. Think about like a simple note-taking app. It's great because it's simple. You open it, write down your thoughts, you're done. But then imagine, right, the developers are like, let's add collaboration, cloud integration, presentation modes. Suddenly, that simple note-taking experience, it's gone. Too many options, too many menus.
Yeah. Totally. It's like it stops being what it was, not necessarily better. It reminds me of this time I downloaded an update for my podcast app, right? The one I use it to listen to this very show, in fact. And they totally redesigned the whole thing. All the buttons were different. And features I used constantly were buried in menus. I spent I don't know how long just trying to listen to my podcasts.
Yeah, that's so common. We get used to doing things a certain way, our workflow. So even a small change can really throw things off. And it kind of shows what the source is getting at, right? That whole new and improved thing, it's not always better for us, the users. Sometimes I think those updates, those new features are more about, market trends, competition, or even the developers. They just want to play with the new tech, not really about making it better for us.
Right, yeah. It's easy to forget. Like, there are actual people behind those updates making decisions about, what to change, how to change it, and those decisions, they're not always, I don't know, objective or about making the software the best it can be.
Totally. And that kind of takes us back to what you're saying, right? About software completeness. Like, when is it okay to say, this does what I need, I'm good?
Yeah, tough question. Because on the one hand, you want software that's always, evolving, getting better,
Yeah,
but also there's something to be said for stability, knowing the tools you use are going to work the way you expect.
for sure. And this source, they say finding that balance is like a two-way street. So developers, they have to be aware of, how their users use the software, avoid unnecessary changes that like mess up their flow or make it more complex than it needs to be. But then as users, we have to play our part too.
So it's more than just like hitting update every time.
Yeah. Be more, I don't know, choosy, intentional maybe about like all our tech, really. Do we know why we're getting this update? What problem does it solve? Is it something we actually need, or are we just, tempted by the shiny new thing?
That's a good point.
Well,
It's about like taking control, even with updates.
exactly. And it's about complete not meaning it can't change. There's a difference between, just adding stuff and making things better for the user.
This whole conversation has been super interesting. So I guess to wrap up our deep dive on software updates, the big takeaway is be mindful, right? Be mindful of why those updates exist, what we need as users, and that sometimes the best, most complete thing is just the thing that works.
Well said.
So next time that notification pops up, don't just hit install. Take a second, think, is this for me, or am I just chasing that, new and improved feeling? Food for thought, I guess, as we, wander this crazy digital world. Until next time, keep exploring.